For me, I guess the beginning or the acceleration point for me was probably in 2011, 2012, which was the case for quite a few people. Um, and I started to perceive ghosts, actually, was part of my awakening. And I wasn't a kid that perceived them growing up or anything like that. But as I got deeper into meditation, there was something that was unlocked as far as my ability to perceive different energies. And it was very confusing, as you can imagine, for somebody who loves structure and being able to explain what I was perceiving. That just got me more curious. And so there was a few years there where I was perceiving disembodied consciousness or different levels of energy. And as that accelerated, I then also had like extraterrestrial contact, which we can talk about, but it's pretty out there. But all these different types of contacts that started to really accelerate my own process, which ultimately led to what you could call a Kundalini awakening.
Welcome to the Mindful Method podcast, where we don't just fill your ears, we fill your mind with the tools to enhance your emotional and physical reality. I'm your host, Jiordana Sade, here to guide you on this journey of the body-brain connection and help you take your power back to create the life you've always wanted. So grab a seat, because class is in session and our method is on the syllabus. Here at the Mindful Clinic, we're not just changing your mind, we're changing your life. One mindful moment at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Method podcast. Today I have a very mindful guest here, and I'm so excited to welcome Crystal Cassidy to the Mindful Method podcast. Thanks for being here.
So happy to be here, Jordana.
Okay, so I did a little bit of reading on you, and some of the practices that you've, I'll say, mastered and that you incorporate in your life. And we align in so many ways, which is probably why this connection happened. But if you don't mind, could you just tell me a little bit about your story and what brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, so really two sides to my coin. The first one being I love science. A real big nerd. So I studied biochemistry in school. I got into pharmaceutical development and cancer genomics and research. And so that's a very analytical side to my mind and the way that I move through the world. And I love understanding frameworks and how things work, because the better I can understand that, the more permission I can give myself to explore more deeply. And that also kind of applies to my spiritual journey. And so I started meditating when I was 12. Um, and this was through martial arts. So, like, martial arts was my life for over a decade. I traveled the world. It was very much my community, and part of that amazing gift in the martial arts community is meditation, and it's a Zen kind of foundational practice. And I didn't really appreciate it at the time, of course. I was 12, and but as I got older, I realized what a gift that was to be exposed to the practice of becoming familiar with yourself. And I started to notice the more that I could do that, I could access this kind of flow state in my martial arts performance that started to translate to my life. And so I had a spiritual awakening, if many different components to that, but really accelerated in my 20s, mystical experiences, connection with other beings, of that are really highly evolved. And I just got more and more curious. And so when I was lucky enough to have the space to create something, I started to think about, what would I have wished existed when I first started off on my journey? And it brought me to creating SoulPod, which I think of as a new platform for where we're at right now in modern awakening in the spiritual journey. And so we have structure, which I love, and we personalize the experience to where you're at in your spiritual journey right now. And we also pair that with community features, which we're working on a lot this year and we're really excited about. So SoulPod is kind of my love letter to humanity. It's what I wish I had, and I hope that it helps people on their journeys as they awaken.
Oh, that's such a beautiful story. As soon as you said you started meditation when you were 12, I was like, "Whoa, either you have the coolest parents ever or
They're
you like."
pretty cool. They're
Yeah,
pretty
or
cool.
well, very lucky, but, yeah, I have 2 kids, so my son is 9, and we do kind of like dream state meditation where, it just kind of helps him get into his sleep a little bit better. Um, yeah, and so I love being able to kind of like play around with that with kids. He also did taekwondo, and it's probably different. I don't
Oh,
know what.
cool.
And so, but I totally know what you're saying, where it's like that awareness of being able to kind of like shut out the outside world and like come in and turn inward. And I think if you can do that as a kid, it'll like totally translate when you're an adult.
100%. It's one of the biggest gifts that I got in my years growing up from my parents. They were very big on like pick two things that you really want to go into deeply and don't try and do like all of the things. And there's pros and cons to that, but looking back, I really appreciate that because it did allow us to go deeply into a few areas and really get to understand it, what it meant to do something for a long period of time and master it in a way.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you mentioned that you kind of like what had a spiritual awakening.
Mm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that looked like? And I have a science background too. I'm a Virgo, if that means anything to you, but like I'm
Oh my
very
gosh, so am I.
when's your birthday? I
September 4th.
I'm the 20th. Um,
Amazing.
so that makes total sense now.
Makes so much sense why we're talking. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I also love like the scientific structure of
Yeah.
yeah, just really understanding things. And there's so many pros and cons to the scientific method in itself. Um,
Yeah.
we can like argue that all day long, but if we are able
Mhm.
to actually research something and like study it and go deeper and there's a word I'm looking for, like not copy it, but like do it again.
Yeah.
Think it is so,
Reproducible. Yeah.
yeah, like, and then generalize it to a specific topic, like, I'm obsessed with it. But
Yeah.
I also too had this very structured, like, scientific background, and then I don't know if we wanna call it a spiritual awakening or just, like, started to recognize with my clients that, with science and then with psychology, I could get them to a certain level, and then but there was always
Mm.
30% that was just kind of missing, and that's when I started diving
Totally.
spirituality. And so, obviously, my story is different from yours, but can you tell me a little bit about that spiritual awakening that you had?
Yeah, and I think I just want to double click on this because you're pointing to something that I think is really important, which is that the structure and even science only can bring you so far. And at some point, you have to let go of the analytical, linear process of understanding things and experiencing things. And the spiritual awakening, the spiritual up-leveling of consciousness, however you want to put that, it's a non-linear experience. It is very much outside of structure and their structure can help you enter it, but once you're in it, it's a very it's a quantum experience. Many different possibilities are existing. And so for me, I guess the beginning or the acceleration point for me was probably in 2011, 2012, which was the case for quite a few people. Um, and I started to perceive ghosts, actually, was part of my awakening. And I wasn't a kid that perceived them growing up or anything like that. But as I got deeper into meditation, there was something that was unlocked as far as my ability to perceive different energies. And it was very confusing, as you can imagine, for somebody who loves structure and being able to explain what I was perceiving. That just got me more curious. And so there was a few years there where I was perceiving disembodied consciousness or different levels of energy. And as that accelerated, I then also had like extraterrestrial contact, which we can talk about, but it's pretty out there. But all these different types of contacts that started to really accelerate my own process, which ultimately led to what you could call a Kundalini awakening.
Mhm.
I was in meditation. I was probably like 20 minutes into it, and all of a sudden, my central channel just lit up with a lot of energy and very concentrated in the first few centers. And at the time, I didn't have a really deep understanding of what that central channel activation or Kundalini awakening was. And so that led me down a deeper path to understand what was happening to me. Um, because after that happened, I had this experience of oneness, which a lot of people talk about, but you can't really come back from that. It's almost like you've peered through the veil. It's this experience of believing that we're all connected and transitioning that belief into a knowing. And that's really how I define awakening, is from belief to knowing. And that really, from there, I mean, it's just been a wild ride of exploring consciousness and expansion.
Wow. Just so you know, nothing is too out there for
Okay.
the podcast or for me. I did my very first, like I host psychedelic retreats, and I did my
Mm.
first like hosting retreat in Joshua Tree. And
Oh,
I
amazing.
was unaware of like what, like talk about extraterrestrial
Yeah.
community. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Literally, I felt like we all came off of a spaceship, and I was like, there are certain things, like even my staff who, were earlier on in their like spiritual journey, they were forever changed after that experience because you can't unsee what you see.
You can't. Yeah. They love Joshua Tree. That is
Yeah.
a portal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was insane. I will not do another psychedelic experience there, that's for sure. Just
Yeah.
for the
You don't
protection
need
of
it.
myself and the clients.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yeah, I just wanted to reflect back to you. Totally feel free. Like, and I've
Mhm.
nothing would surprise me, but very cool. So I really love what you said about, and I think you probably saw me kind of like actually internalize it, but you said it's that transition from believing to that knowing. And
Yeah.
I think when we talk about like basic manifestation, like if we like manifestation is so trendy right now, everyone's like, oh yeah, manifest it. And it's like, okay, well, if you believe it with 100% certainty, then like it has to come
Mm.
through. But how would you define or explain, maybe for somebody who's listening, like how do we get to that? Because I can say, like, I believe I'm gonna have,
Mm.
it's XYZ, and like you believe it because like but there is, but if it's not a deep knowing, it really doesn't come through like that. So how do we explain that
Mm.
transition?
Such a juicy question and topic. Um, yeah, I think where people tend to get tripped up is the belief part isn't enough. It's it's this the belief, I think of it as like your North Star. It's
Mm,
like you're becoming aware of a possibility and where it is that you want to go, and you're directing your attention and your energy in that direction. So the belief is great, but the next part of that is transitioning that belief, like we were talking about, to a knowing, which I think the vehicle to do that is through how you feel. And in a lot of manifestation work, that we're talking more about, instead of the belief, we're talking a lot more about how it is that you actually feel. Because if you say, I believe that I can make $1 million next year, if there's anything within you and your subconscious that contradicts that belief,
mm,
then it falls flat. It loses that momentum, and you're not really pointing in that direction of that North Star that you're shooting for. But if you can say that to yourself with intention and feel and know deeply that it's already true, it exists, that is a possibility in the field, and you're just coming into deeper alignment with it through your knowing of that possibility. So it sounds like a little bit like semantics, but I think um, there's some really deep truths to it. And
mm.
so I do a lot of my work around manifestation, around transitioning from that belief, working through my limiting beliefs, anything that's standing between me and that North Star, releasing that, and then really seeing if I can dial up that feeling and knowing of it being true now, not not in the future. And so that's drawing your future to your now.
Yeah, that's that kind of like another trendy word for everyone listening, but that's like quantum leap, right? Like every
Yeah.
time this, and like, and so if we continually see it in the future, then actually there is opportunity for that energy to be kind of like not misdirected, but like blocked, depending on the level of emotions that you go through on a daily basis that contradict that belief or not, right? um
Yeah.
and so, oh, okay, here's a question for you. Totally going off script here, sorry.
Love it.
So do you believe that,
Mm.
because I work with a lot of clients and even with myself, like I have a really hard time explaining to my clients that, you can have anything that you want. Like, because I think that,
Hmm.
the truth is we see suffering around us all the time. And a lot of people, we can understand the rags to riches type of energy, but a lot of people, they want it and they do the manifestation things and they do the affirmations and they write it and they do the meditations, they do the hypnosis. But like at the end of the day, there's still this like deep, I don't know if it's possible for me. And
Hmm.
so, do you believe that like our desires are our, like we have it in another timeline, or like they're like that anybody could have whatever they want? And how would you explain that?
Yeah, I love, 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 love these questions. Yeah, I think it's from a scientific perspective, I think that it exists as a possibility. Certain possibilities get more um, manifest or closer into this dimension of space and time, depending on the energy that is aligning with it. And so there could be, to your point, like everything is possible, but there's going to be certain possibilities that are, you could call it more activated
Mm.
through your intention and your desire, which is an attractive force. So yes, and I think certain things are more probable depending on the momentum that your consciousness has created up until this point in time. And so for people who I totally understand, right? The world is chaotic. There's a lot of change going on, and it's becoming more important than ever to really work on what I call like foundational consciousness and awareness. So you can do the hypnosis, you can do the psychedelics, amazing. They open doors to new possibilities that you may not have been aware of before, and you can connect with them in a more emotional um, way. And there's that time, right? That's like in between those things. And a lot of the work I do is to help with that foundational consciousness every single day. Can you move from the doubt, which is just doubt is really a forgetting of your connection and who it is that you truly are as a creator. It's more in separation than it is in your higher self or your connection. And it's very challenging. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but if you're working on it every day, you're going to notice that your consciousness is moving from this foundational space of, we could call it fear or separation or forgetting. And you're starting to move into the remembering of who it is that you are. And we can call that love, this connection. Everything is connected. And the more you do that, the more open you are to those possibilities. And so when you do tune in and you say, oh, okay, I'm in my foundational momentum is pretty solid, I'm tuning into a new possibility, that becomes a lot more seamless and easy for it to come into your now, this time and space. But it does take work.
Yeah. No, I love the way that you explain that, because even as I was trying to articulate my question, what I really wanted to ask you, and you answered it, but it's like how much of what we experience is because we are the creator, and how much of it
Mm,
is influenced by, okay, like I'm just going to give you an example here. Right before this call, I had a discovery call with like a beautiful woman, and she was telling me how, she is recently divorced, similar to me, and she lost everything, and she's like from going to three kids from shelter to shelter, and she's like, I like, and she's inquiring about my coaching services. And this was actually
mm,
one of the first discovery calls where when I went through the programs and whatever, she was not phased at all by the price, because her energy was really like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'm worth it. I'll
mm-hmm.
It was so hot. I was like, "Yes, girl. If you don't work with me, like, you're gonna
You're
be
gonna be
fine."
just fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but, when shitty things happen to us, like, out of our control,
Yeah.
and takes all of your money or, you get like, literally in 1 week, I got my car stolen and my phone stolen this past week, and it's just like,
Oh my gosh.
can't talk
Yeah.
about it. So, like, when shit happens like that, like,
Mm.
how do we be the creator when, like, it
Yeah.
feels like there's all these things outside of our control?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
such a good question. Oh my gosh, we could talk all day. Um, yeah, I think this is very nuanced, and I do understand how it could be triggering for people to hear. Like, you create your life, and if something bad comes into it, you're like, well, I don't think I created this. And you're not necessarily wrong. I think the thing to remember is truth is relative depending on the level of consciousness that you're perceiving it from. So, for example, we all know forgiveness is great, right? This is a very important energy to activate, is to forgive whatever it is that you need to forgive to release yourself from the past into the present. Because forgiveness is a drag on your past, it's tied to something in your past. And you're letting that go, which is calling more of your energy into this space and time, which is great. So forgiveness important. At another level of consciousness, forgiveness isn't even necessary because there was nothing to forgive to begin with.
Mm.
So you can see it gets kind of you can call it paradoxical. I think the spiritual journey is very paradoxical. And
Yeah.
so I just got a big wave of energy. That was interesting. So that's true.
Mm,
That's confirmed. And so when we talk about things like you're the creator, you are the creator. Um, a lot of what you may have been creating was unconscious, which is not your fault. You don't need to feel bad about it. You just weren't aware of it. And so there's certain elements or certain experiences that are coming into your life in order to give you the opportunity to become aware of it and to start to confront those energies that you just it was in your subconscious. I'll give you an example from my own life. I got severely ill in 2020,
mm,
like near death experience, was dancing with death energy. It took me a year to really get back to somewhat normal, being able to walk again and everything. And so I'm very spiritual, right? And so I was like, what the heck? Why did this come into my experience? I don't think I created it. And when I was in it, if somebody had said that, I would have been like, you know what, you can just like go
no.
somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as I moved through it, I was very aware it was karmic. I
Mm,
had past lives coming up when I was kind of in this state of a lot of pain. And I knew that I was working through old energies that maybe weren't even applicable to this lifetime. And so it was an opportunity, and my life completely changed, as cliche as it sounds, because of that experience. And so, can I say that wasn't fair? And you know, did I have to go through that in order to become who it is I am now? I mean, I think on some level, yes, it was necessary. Um, so I think both things can be true. One, don't be too hard on yourself when bad things happen because it could be for who knows what reasons. And sometimes the reason doesn't matter.
mm,
Trying to put a story to why something happens sometimes doesn't matter. All that matters is you being able to move your energy, move the emotions, become aware of your limiting beliefs, release them when you can, and continue to move on that paradigm from fear to love. That's any experience is asking us to move in that direction. Even when you're faced with death, how could I release and surrender my fear of death to move more into love? And that is one heck of a journey. So all things are true, it's
mm,
it's it's hard to say, you're always the creator when there's difficult things going on, and we're all connected. So ultimately, there really is one creator. We're just perceiving our creation from different perspectives, and that's the self and the personality and the ego. But we're all experiencing it together.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was a really good answer. Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, I very similar. I have this like joke, but it's not really a joke because it's I think I've also manifested this into my reality, but like every 5 years or so, I have like the worst fucking year ever. Like it's like ego death. Like
Yeah.
everything crashes down. And every time, like very similar to you, it was 2018 for me, but I had like my a crazy health crisis, like went from being
Mm.
run marathons to like can't walk up the stairs, like fainting. It was just awful. Took me like over a year to almost 2 years to recover, but that literally shifted me into an entirely new thing. And so I in the moment, I like it at the time, I'm like, are you kidding me, guides? Like, where are you? Like what
Right.
now? What's the purpose? Like someone throw me a bone. But when you
Yeah.
look back in hindsight, that was 2020, right? It's like, okay, if I actually didn't go through that, there's a way I would be where I am right now. And so I guess my next question for you then is, and you mentioned it, so maybe we can go a little bit deeper, but I also see, especially in my practice, a lot of the times people get stuck though, right? Like
Mm.
they get
Yeah.
because and this is not their fault at all. I totally get it. It's depending on what you're going through, but like they do become the victim of the circumstance. They don't actually ever like I'm like every 5 years there's a bad year, but like, eventually it shifts and I move out and I elevate and it's great. And so I'm like excited for this one to be over. But um how do we move through it so we can kind of come out on the other side rather than like letting it engulf us?
Mm. Such a good question, and certainly something I've experienced with when you're in a health crisis and your body, for those of us, especially Virgos, they're like used to things working in a certain way, and all of a sudden those structures, those ways of operating are thrown up in the air. We're like, oh my gosh. Um, but yeah, the thing that comes to mind is that while it's understandable that you can find yourself in a victim consciousness of like, this is unfair, that's very easy and understandable to be in. So I'm a big fan of when you find yourself in those moments, it's inevitable for all of us. Give yourself a lot of grace because
Mm,
you're transitioning. You're in the chrysalis, when the caterpillar is becoming a butterfly. When you're in the chrysalis, the caterpillar has no idea what's going on. It has some instincts,
mm,
but it's in this like super tight space and it's literally dissolving into nothing, which I think is crazy. And it's being restructured to become this butterfly. It's one of the most insane biological processes I've can think of. You're literally getting disintegrated. All your old self is gone in the chrysalis, quite literally. And so you have to give yourself a lot of grace when you're in those moments. I would say step two is to remember your power, because when you're in the victim mentality, even when your body's not working the way that you wish it to be, there's the victim mentality is a forgetting of your power, of who it is that you are, that you're an
mm,
infinite being, that you are pure consciousness, that you are the cosmos. And it's in those moments, and for me that was life changing, was to remember that and to surrender to the best of your ability. Which when I think of surrender, it's like instead of you like trying to swim upstream, letting go of that and just allowing the current of life to carry you and trusting that. There's also this component of trust. It's really hard to trust when you're faced with a lot of unknown, but that's what surrender is moving into that current of trust and letting that faith carry you when that requires you to let go of grasping. And so
mm,
for me, one some of the big spiritual moments I had when I was really sick was when I let go of grasping and this spaciousness opened up. And I asked for help from the spiritual realms, and there was an answer, there was an experience that met me. But it required my surrender and it required my openness to something coming in to my experience that was new. So yeah, that's what comes up for me.
okay. Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually not what I thought you were going to say. So I love that. And thank you for breaking it down in steps. I loved the structure. Um,
Mm.
You mentioned, I think you called it foundational consciousness.
Hmm.
So, can you tell me what that looks like for you? Like, I'm sure like this is like part of your like the soul pod and all of that, but like, what does that look like on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's carving out this time for yourself, not just because you want to reduce stress, not just because you want to calm nervous system, which we all do, and that does come from it, but because you want to align to your highest, you can call it timeline, your highest self. You want to move through life in a way that feels magical, to be honest, because that is a possibility when you move your foundational consciousness from fear more into connection, love, courage, harmony, bliss, joy, these higher levels of consciousness, which are very real frequencies that you can stabilize into. And when you give yourself that time, and this is beyond like a 5 minute grounding meditation, which is fantastic, huge fan. But you need this additional space, the additional time, especially at the beginning, to really become first more aware of what you're currently how you're currently operating, which is the thoughts. It's not about finding calm, it's about expanding awareness. I think that gets a lot of people confused about meditation. It's not necessarily always a calm experience, especially at the beginning when you're becoming aware of thought patterns that you weren't maybe previously aware of, and you're needing to face those to move through them. And when you enter a mystical experience, it's a very nervous system activating experience. It's also not super calm.
Mhm.
So when you carve out that time for your evolution, which I really do believe that this is an inner technology that completely eclipses AI and whatever it is that we're developing. I'm also a fan of AI. So that's another conversation. But
Uh,
this inner technology is something incredibly more powerful than anything outside of you. And if you can tune into that and activate that, it is going to change your life. I have no doubt. And
Mhm.
so that daily practice, that daily spaciousness to activate that technology, I think is why we're all here. And that's what we're about at SoulPod.
Mm. Wow, that really, I just like saw such a collective elevation with that last sentence. Like I was like, oh shit. Like this it's not just like you said, just for you guys listening, we are talking about meditation. I did not make that clear. I think you might
Oh,
have,
sorry.
but
Yeah.
no, you said it, but I did. But you know, it's not just about meditating, right? I took a class in university on was it I think it was a meditation class because it was like one of the only electives that I was available. But um, I learned a lot about meditation because I was a very meditation adverse. I'm like a child of
Mm,
ADHD, and I was like, I can't shut my mind off. But when I realized it's actually not about turning it off, and it's actually about like, depending on the meditation or the theologies that you follow, like, whether it's like clear focus on one thing or like expansion
hmm.
of the mind or to hear the narratives, it is so, so, so expansive. But when you were talking about SoulPod, and activating this like inner engineer that we all have, like I literally just saw the collective just like elevate. I'm like, ooh, there we go.
Love it.
Yeah, it's very cool. And so because I also, like I'm a trained hypnotherapist, but I've
Mm,
been to hypnotherapist before, and even in the way that I was trained, I believe that like, there's just so many different ways to do it, right? And
yeah.
so when we're talking about meditation here, like is there a specific, I'm sure it is, you're very structured, but is there a specific structure to it? Is it like guided meditation? Is it silent meditation? Like, can you just
Mm.
take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, and just to double click on that, there is no one way to awaken. This
Mhm.
is an innate process within you, and that's why we have people that have spontaneous awakenings. But meditation, hypnotherapy, psychedelics, these are all portals to help you explore, access, and then stabilize these levels of consciousness. And so I always tell people really trust where your curiosity is bringing you when you're consciously on the awakening path, because you'll usually get guided into the right structure or practices or teachers or guides for you.
Mhm.
Um, For me, it's meditation has it started as a tool and it became a way of being, the meditative experience.
Mhm.
So you start accessing that on your cushion and you start bringing it into your everyday life. But it can be anything. I'm a big fan of some structure, especially even after I've been meditating daily for over a decade. There comes times where I want the structure to help me get into that alpha, theta, gamma brainwave state to help me find that spaciousness, that non-local consciousness. And then there's times where unfocused expansion is really powerful. And I think at some point on your awakening journey, you want to build that muscle of being able to self guide. And that means that you can access a state of consciousness wherever you're at. You don't need anybody. And that's a really powerful skill to develop. And there's all kinds of different techniques. I love Kriya. I love a little bit of breath work to help me come into my body, come into some sort of alignment before I enter into the meditative state. I like to spend a little bit of time thinking using we call it the think box or the analytical mind to really get clear, okay, on what North Star I'm aiming for. Then I go into meditation and then reflect. And I think in SoulPod, the reflection part is really important, I think, because when you come out of an experience, whether it's hard or you had a big breakthrough, you're going to have both at certain times. Taking that time while you're still in this very open, creative state to not just jump straight into your life, but to journal, take some time, you'll be amazed at what comes through in those post meditation moments. So, we're big on reflection as well. And then the community aspect. So, all kinds of weird things can happen when you're awakening. You're entering non local consciousness, you're entering the field. So, all kinds of things can happen. So, it's really nice to have people, your soul fam, to chat with and share with. And they're a lot of times a reflection or a mirror for what you're going through. And it's really important to know that you're not alone in that experience and that no matter how weird it gets, um, someone else has likely experienced something similar. So that's what I love about the community aspect as well.
Yeah. I'm gonna double click on that one. But, I have, have like small group coaching and one-on-one coaching, and I almost always say like the group coaching is where you want to be because every person that's in that group like is supposed to be there. It's like it's
Oh,
so
yeah.
like I mean obviously it's just it's too serendipitous. Even I have two clients who are in this like semi-private group. They don't know each other all. They could not be more polar opposite from like their personalities to like where they are in their life. And like we get in the call and everything that I'm saying to one person is 100% relative to what the other person's going through in that time. Like it's like it's so meant to be, and it's so cool to be able to see yourself see it mirrored back to you in that way because it's a lot less personal, I find. And
Yeah.
like right here, we're talking about like expansion, right? And, we're talking about like elevating to that like highest alignment, that love. But, and it is the same thing when you break it all down. But a lot of my network and a lot of the people that listen to my podcast are, trying to move from these very like depressive states, like whether it's addiction or
Mm,
like substance abuse or food addiction and so it's not just, a lot of what an individual who is struggling with something like that goes through is very fed by shame, and there's like a lot of hiding. And so when
mm,
see witness somebody else's experience and see that, oh, actually we're not different, like I'm not bad, like other people do
mhm.
too, it's really really powerful and really healing. So yeah, very cool.
I love that. Such important work that you're doing in those spaces. And And to your point, it's like sometimes if you haven't seen it before, you don't know it's possible. So when you, like you're talking about, when you see that somebody has conquered something or done something that you didn't know was possible, that like lights up that North Star that we're talking about in your sky, and you're like, oh, like I could do that. And just knowing that that's possible for you, I think can be a huge breakthrough. And it's one of my favorite things that we do at SoulPod is our annual retreat and Joshua Tree. So very mystical. We may meditate out under the stars and connect with some ET, but it's so interesting in those containers. You're totally right. The people that end up in them together, there's such, and you can't anticipate it. You couldn't have planned it that way. It's the exact right group of people for that time. And they become just as much each other's teachers as anybody who's guiding. And it's just really, I think that's what like community is all about.
Yeah. It actually really helped me as a perfectionist Virgo,
Yes.
to kind of like take the pressure off myself a little bit when I started to realize like actually everybody's here healing. Like I'm not responsible for like the healing of this individual. Like, I'm here to guide and I'm a channel, but like it's
Yeah.
like everybody's working together. It was a really big moment for me. I still kind of struggle with it sometimes. But okay. What what would you say to somebody who's listening to this and they're like, I
Mm.
don't know what my North Star is. Like, I don't even know what I want. Like,
Mm.
I have a lot of people, like clients who are like, I know I'm meant for something more. I don't know what it is.
Mm. Mm. Mm-mm. Yeah, I would say I think two things are coming forward. One, go more into stillness, into that spaciousness, let go of any of the expectations or the grasping and just access that nothingness, the void, the field. Spend more time in that space than with your analytical mind because when you're looking for what your North Star is, it oftentimes wants to come in through the nonlinear experience. It's inspiration. I think of inspiration as being a spontaneous connection with the field. And for me, when I've been deeply inspired and moved into directions I didn't anticipate through my analytical mind, it was through those moments of emotion. Like I connected to when I'm writing a book, which I have been for 8 years. It's been a long time, but it's a science fiction novel. And when I first came into contact with that idea, I was not in my analytical mind. And it hit me so hard with so much, in a beautiful way, with so much emotion that I couldn't explain. I knew it was important. And I'm
Mm.
not saying that's exactly how it comes through for everybody, but I do think you have an increased access to identifying what it is that lights your soul up because that thing that you're looking for isn't going to be originated likely from the self, from the ego, from the personality, from the separation, even though that serves a very important component. It's going to come from your highest self, from your soul. And so the more you can bring and access your soul into this dimension of space and time, you're going to contact that purpose or that inspiration. It's just a matter of time.
Do you follow human design?
A little bit, I would say I dabble. I'm a manifesting generator.
I just wanted to know what you were. I'm a projector and it's
Mm,
and so like we're the seers, but it was something that you said just resonated so much. And it might be very projector specific, but I also find that when people are looking for like their purpose or like what they want and they can't figure it out, a lot of that time it's because it's like tied to something else. It's like, okay, well, like I know I hate my 9 to 5 job. And so I need to find my purpose, but like that purpose has to like make me money. And like it doesn't make sense.
mm,
Write like a nonfiction novel. Like, I'm not like, I'm not, but you know what I mean? But when really, actually, when we can quiet the mind and we can recognize how important that, like, writing that nonfiction, or whatever novel it is, it's not about monetization of it. It's about being in your soul's purpose, which then
oh, yeah.
elevates you to an energy which aligns you with like the support, the financial support, et cetera, et cetera. I
Hmm.
think a lot of people are afraid to like play almost,
Yeah.
because there's just so much pressure on
Yeah.
success and what that should look like.
Yeah. And that's like a constant dance. And a lot of times what's coming up, because you mentioned that, is doing a lot of your first and second center work. So your first center is all about your foundations. It's all about your connection with money, with feeling safe, both like physically in this 3D reality safe and also internally to be authentically who it is that you are. So that first center in this context, I think, is really important. And the more work that you do with that energy and that part of your central channel, the more that could move in a way that allows you to better connect to your play, which is second center, pleasure, creation. So this is really, really first and second center focused work. And the more that you can kind of move through that, um, and that's to say, Ram Dass says, you know, we're all looking to be spiritual and to evolve. We also need to know our zip code. So there's one foot in your human. I call it like my crystal, my human, and there's another foot in the mystical. And so if you're kind of prioritizing, we're naturally obviously prioritizing the human, but if you start to prioritize the mystical a bit more, I think that this can start to become a lot more interesting for people connecting to their purpose. And along the way, doing the work, like even for me at times, I'll be like, ooh, first center is acting up. Like I need to go back. It's an infinite onion. You're never done. Go back to my first center, do some work on it. And that helps propel me into what's most aligned for me next. And I also think, you know, and take it or leave it if it resonates with you, but a lot of times what we think is safe and predictable is really an illusion. And so if we prioritize, the 9 to 5, which you can also be living your purpose in your 9 to 5, you're like lit up, like, you know, keep going. And so I just sometimes I challenge myself, and I have never been let down by the universe when I've had a calling into something that seems like, when I moved from biotech into what we're doing with SoulPod, that was a huge trust fall because I could get any job I wanted in biotech. I had it all figured out, like it made so much sense. Everybody was very confused when I made other decisions. Um, but it was just listening to those whispers. Steven Spielberg talks about this. He's like, the only difference between me and other people is that when those whispers came, a lot of times we ignore them or we haven't attuned enough to even hear them. He's like, I listened to them, those really quiet whispers of my soul and creativity. And so I think that's also a component of this, is like allowing yourself to listen to the whispers, attuning yourself to be able to hear the whispers. And then it's a whole nother thing to follow them because it requires a lot of trust and faith. But at least in my experience, I've never been let down when I've done that.
Mhm. Yeah, there was I'm gonna butcher this person. It might be Rich Roll, it might not. I'm not a pop culture person, but I've heard him interviewed like 100 times. But he was saying that the last person, he's a producer, music producer, and first of all, he talks about Andrew Huberman, Dr. Andrew Huberman.
Mm.
Um, I love him. Well, I used to be like a huge big fangirl. I haven't listened in a while, but when he interviewed him, and I saw Andrew Huberman here live in Toronto. He was talking about how he spent time with this music producer, and he like went over for
Oh,
the
Rick Rubin.
yes, that's
Yeah.
it, that's it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Love
Um,
him.
yeah, so cool, right? And he was saying,
Hmm.
like, Andrew Huberman was saying that he would just go into these kind of like mini naps, he called them. But like it's actually he's like he's meditating. He would
He is
go into
meditating.
um, and he was like, yeah,
Mini naps. That's so
yeah, it's like
funny.
he would just like nap all the time. These like 20-minute little like complete just, in his own head, in his own space. And when I was listening to this music producer talking about his creativity, he was like, the last person that I write for is the audience. Like the first person I write for is me. And it's
Yeah.
just so incredible to see somebody who has built that much success, who literally does not care about the aftermath. It's not about anyone else or
Mhm.
the money or the validation. Like when you produce for you because you're in this like aligned state, like it actually is for the collective, and that's when it's like
Mm.
and I was just like, whoa, mind blown. So
Oh, and it's such a powerful. I think Elizabeth Gilbert talks a bit about this in Big Magic as well. Is it like these ideas, the North Star, your inspiration, it's its own energy. I really like thinking about it this way. It's like SoulPod and the book that I'm writing. It's not all about me. It's an energy that contacted me and wanted to be manifest, and I'm simply a vessel for it to be birthed into this dimension of space and time. And so I'm constantly listening to like what it wants to be. Where does it want to go? And as far as like how I think about it is kind of like what you're saying, which is that I'm not super attached to the outcome. If I get too far into my human crystal, I'm like, I'm really attached to the outcome. Um, but in practice, it's like I know I'm being of service in some way by serving this frequency or this energy
Mm,
in the intention to uplift others and delight myself. And so once you believe that, and it's really shifted from belief to knowing, then the outcome becomes really kind of inconsequential, because as cliche as it is, it's about who it is that you become on the journey of creation. Uh, the creation outcome or whatever it is kind of tertiary. And that has so been the case. Like with SoulPod, I've never had more fun creating something. Like it's just really fun. It's like playing for me. And the book is a different energy, but I am just so excited to complete it because that's the promise that I made that energy. Where it wants to go, what it wants to be after that is really none of my business. And
Mm.
maybe it is to be in a drawer somewhere. Maybe it's to be a global bestseller. I don't know. But all I can do is serve that energy, that inspiration to the best of my abilities. And that's what creation in my mind is all about. So Rick Rubin, Elizabeth Gilbert, they're onto something when it comes to like what it means to create.
yeah. I love the even just the visual of it's a separate energy and you're like and you that actually like I as soon as you said it like I got it. I like felt it. And I think that that's
Mm,
important. It was the same thing that happened with me when I first created my like mindful method and with my food psychology program. It was like it was for me, but it was also it just like came to me and nothing came to me so quickly in my whole life. And then you put it together and it's like, oh my gosh, there's actually a huge community of people that genuinely need this. And so it wasn't like it was I was just the channel and then the people that needed
exactly.
it and now we shift into something else. But listen, I could talk to you all day.
Same.
Like for real. But
Yeah.
I want to be
To be
mindful.
continued.
Yes, for sure. I think a part two is definitely necessary because there's so many things that I wanted to touch on here. But I mean, I would trust another Virgo with my life. So if you guys are listening, um, she probably does have it figured out. But if you talked about Soul Pod and the structure and helping
Mm,
people kind of create these foundational consciousness so that we can bring meditation into our lives and collectively evolve. But I'd love to know where we can find you.
mm.
Do you have a website? Do you have an offer? Like, what would be the best way for somebody to start to dive into this with you?
Yeah, so you can find us at soulpodapp.com. We're also in the App Store and Google Android users. We're working on it. We're going to get there, so but not yet. But you can find us on iOS, and you can also find more information about a retreat. We got a couple spots open the end of August in Joshua Tree. Amazing venue. It's going to be such a powerful group of people. And yeah, I think those are the big places. You can find us on Instagram as well. And I'm happy to get your community a free month of SoulPod. We can include that code in the release notes.
That is so exciting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to chat after because I'm in the process of building an app and like I'm losing my mind.
Oh
So
yeah. Oh, I've got some tips. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yes, I'm not a techie person at all. And also, guys, if you're listening to this, the only reason I wouldn't go back to Joshua Tree and do my own retreat is with psychedelics, with because you just don't need them there. But
Yeah,
like
you don't. You really don't.
that place in itself is so magical, and I would 100% recommend it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming
Uh,
on. Can't wait to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jordana. This was so fun.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, guys, if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you back on another episode of the Mindful Method podcast. Bye.